And we might have someone, for example, holding up your arms while you're in Warrior 2, if we stick with that example. And what we see is some people collapse on the person holding them. Some people won't let them take the weight. You know, I'm a strong, independent young woman. I don't need anyone holding me. Some people kind of smile at the person. Some people ignore them. And all these patterns come out. My view is that human beings are, how can I say, partly holographic or partially consistent across domains and contexts, meaning that patterns come out real quick, even if it's just like being seen or being ignored. And there's only about 8 possibilities for human relationship, and they're all pretty easy to model through this kind of simulators we're creating. And then the patterns are so obvious that it's like people laugh and cry and go, wow, this has, been so insightful.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. Wow, powerful question to pose to you today. What are you choosing to embody when you come to your yoga mat? Are you using the yoga postures to gain awareness of your subconscious patterning? These are the questions we're going to explore in today's episode. I'm interviewing Mark Walsh. He's the founder of Embodied Yoga Principals. It's basically 26 postures that he's developed that can help you feel, embodied. And if you're not sure what that means, absolutely keep listening, because you really won't think about your yoga practice the same way after this episode. EYP, Embodied Yoga Principles, are a blend of yoga asana, partner work, body therapy, and martial arts. And they all fuse together to create a unique system of yoga for people who want to achieve real-world success. The postures and the group exercises are used to explore and develop the body as a way of being. This kind of yoga is not esoteric as Mark describes it. It's really about improving your personal freedom and the relationships that matter in your life. This is something I'm really passionate about, bringing yoga off the mat into your daily life. And Mark really kind of bridges the gap by telling us actual physical yoga postures and ways we can think about the postures in order to do this. So I'm really excited to share this episode with you. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you to support the show. You know the 2 ways you can do it: leaving a rating or review here on iTunes, or making a purchase at SavannahSpirit.com. Today, I wanted to feature Savannah Spirit's beautiful amber jewelry. Amber is a therapeutic substance often prescribed by early physicians for headaches, heart problems, arthritis, and a variety of other ailments. In the ancient times, amber was also carried by travelers for protection while they were on the road. Amber is a powerful healer that gives the wearer a really lovely sense of health and well-being. It also helps to balance the emotions, clear the mind, and release negative energy. As if that isn't enough, amber is also known to aid with manifestation and ease stress by clearing phobias and fears. It's just a really lovely warm stone to wear. And remember, every time you make a purchase on SavannahSpirit.com, it also helps supply and distribute vitamin A to Indian children in need. So check out amber jewelry at SavannahSpirit.com, or use that code podcast30 to get 30% off anything your heart desires. Now let's dive into our conversation with Mark Walsh. He's the founder of Embodied Yoga Principals. As I mentioned, he has extensive training and facilitation experience with organizations all around the world, like Unilever, L'Oreal, Virgin Atlantic, so many more. And he's a black belt in Aikido as well as a yoga teacher, and he has 20 years of experience training and teaching on over 5 continents. I think you're really going to enjoy everything he has to share with us. Let's dive into the interview. Mark, I'm so glad to have you here on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
A pleasure.
And I know you, like me, are very passionate about bringing yoga off the mat. I'd love for you to tell listeners what embodied yoga is and how you became interested in sort of fusing yoga, but also what happens off the mat.
Yeah, sure. So I've done traditional asana and meditation and other kinds of things since I was a child, basically. And I realized what I was most interested in was how to use the postures, how to use our practice to help our actual lives. So for me, getting more flexible is not a particular goal of mine. I do some flexibility, some fitness work. That's great. There's point to that, but it's not primarily what's interesting to me. Neither is kind of transcendence or sort of going somewhere else or dressing up in kind of spiritual clothes or spiritual words. What's most interesting for me is the practical matters of my life. How I am with my wife, how I am with my business, the politics of the UK, the different practical things that I'm involved with day to day. Often I start workshops by asking participants, I say, hey, what do you guys care about? What do you care about? And then I say, well, let's do some yoga that really impacts that. Not so much as a holiday from reality, as a way to escape it or to feel good, which, is needed sometimes and could be nice, but actually as an educational method. So the heart really of Embodied Yoga Principles as the method is to learn about oneself. So who am I as a person and how do I get that off the mat practically day to day? So that's really my focus. I feel like there's so many good approaches to yoga, so many ways to do it. And what's really key is knowing, okay, what's the focus here? What's the point?
I love that you're going straight to that, because I think something that is interesting for a lot of us when we read the Yoga Sutras or we dive deeper into a lot of these yogic texts is that we realize so much of the practice is about achieving this state of enlightenment or achieving samadhi, right? And that's really not practical for most of us who you say are married. I mean, yes, of course, we want to connect with something greater than ourselves, which is lovely, but to stay in that constant state it just has nothing to do with being a productive citizen in daily life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Buddhist, so I have nothing against kind of Eastern philosophies, far from it. I think there's loads of wisdom there. There's loads to be learned. And sometimes the kind of bridging to the normal life of the average 21st century American or Brit or French or whatever is something to be lacking there in the kind of bridging that's there. What I also noticed doing various Asian arts, I have a strong background in Aikido, for example, Japanese martial arts, was that someone could get very good at Aikido, throwing people around, and maybe they were still hitting their kids, or maybe they were still an alcoholic. In my case, that was the case. Or maybe they were, just still really stressed day to day, even though they can handle themselves in a fight. And the same with yoga. I know people who are extremely flexible, but it doesn't seem to have transferred across into other areas. And if being flexible was all that was needed, then 10-year-old Chinese gymnasts would all be enlightened.
Right, or those teachers who are so amazing, but then they themselves are, broke or, can't pay their rent on time, or, there can just be this disparity, just like you're saying, where success on the mat or in meditation doesn't necessarily translate to success in day-to-day modern society.
Yeah, and sometimes, the lineages may have come from renuncio practices or people that were off in caves or, have Theravada monks as friends, and they are literally not allowed to handle money. So how does, their practice isn't designed to look at your relationship to money, and they're celibate, so their practice isn't designed to look at sexual relationships in that way. And I'm not suggesting celibacy can't be a beautiful practice, but it's not the path I've chosen, nor most of the people I meet and work with. But how do you do yoga with a mobile phone in your hand? These are questions which are just not answered by the traditions, which I do want to kind of really bow to. I don't want people out there to feel like we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's lots to be offered there. And I just decided, let's focus on more the psychological level, more the practical level, rather than the kind of purely physical, which again has its place, or the kind of transcendent or trying to get enlightened. It just seemed to me that what was most helpful for me and for my students was to work on this level of insight, about myself as a person, and then some choice, okay, give me some options. How do I actually want to be in my business meeting at 7 p.m., not in a cave in the Himalayas or on a beach in Goa.
So how does this look in the physical yoga practice? Because I've seen footage of your classes on your YouTube channel and your workshops, and it looks like people are still coming together to do yoga, as I think most of the listeners would recognize it, Warrior 2 and Tadasana, and there's yoga mats and there's yoga props. But I know that this embodied yoga approach is actually quite different, and you're pulling in partner work and some other interesting aspects. Can you tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, it is pretty different in some ways. Maybe not at heart. Certainly have have traditional yoga teachers that say, no, this is yoga. It's just a real different take on it. Other people say it's not yoga, it's something else. And I'm okay with that too. What I realized is the asana class, the traditional kind of Monday asana class, had become established, and it's really global, and people go to these classes and they're used to going onto mats and doing their thing. So I thought, well, let's work with that. That's actually a really juicy opportunity. Sometimes I think it's an opportunity not taken, but it's a really juicy opportunity. So that was my basic starting place. First of all, I'd say it's Embodied Yoga Principles, which means that people work with it in different ways. It's not a style of yoga. People come to work with me who maybe have 10, 20, 30 years of yoga experience from Hatha yoga, Vinyasa yoga, Acro yoga, Yin yoga, all different styles of yoga. And then they apply it into their classes. So there's the sort of applied version, and there's what an EYP workshop proper might look like. So let's use those examples you said, because I want to, people are probably going, well, what the hell is it? So let's take Warrior 2, right? Classic pose. Most people out there probably have seen it, done it. You could do that as a way of stretching your leg or strengthening your quadricep. That's a physical level. You can do that as a mindfulness practice, which again, beautiful, very helpful. You can do it as a little holiday, a little stress relief from a busy day by, having some intensity, which takes you away from all your thoughts, or, really focusing in on the body to take you away from your chitter chatter and your planning. Very useful. Or the way we use it would be to use it as an inquiry process. So the first time I ever did Warrior 2, which is over 20 years ago, I went in that posture and I was like, yeah, damn right. I like this one. This one feels good. And it was an immediate kind of fit with my habitual embodiment, which comes from my character and my cultural background and various other factors. And I noticed that. I was like, well, that's really interesting, because the person next to me did not have that response. They would hate it. And, for example, in Warrior, we're taking up space. We have the arms outstretched. The people that invented the name were not stupid. They called it Warrior, not kitten pose, for a reason. And we can actually work with that as an inquiry, like, where do I need to be more warrior-like in my life? How would it be to be a warrior at work? What kind of warrior do I want to be? So we can use it both to reveal patterns and also as an inquiry process. And then we actually do something called micro postures, where we're using we might say the energy or the archetype of that posture, and bringing that through small postural changes into how we talk, walk, sit, have conversations, basic things in life, so that energy, if you will, of being a warrior can be translated into normal situations. And then we do partner practice, like how is it to be supported or seen or ignored in your warriorhood with a partner. There's a bit of a download there, Brett. Does that make any sense?
It does. And I'm curious, as someone, I teach a lot of yoga. So I'm really curious how you teach this, because I know, and I also train a lot of yoga teachers, and I'm sure you do too. They're always struggling, like, how can I say everything I want to say about a posture and get it set up with the proper alignment and get people doing the proper breathing in such a short amount of time, right? We're only in Warrior 2, probably a max of 10 breaths. And even then, people's quads start quivering. So how are you bringing this deeper awareness into the class? Is it sort of like you just use a little less time to talk about alignment, or most of the people coming kind of already familiar with the postures, so you can talk more about this? Or does it kind of sort of happen at the beginning of class, where like at the beginning you kind of say, okay, we're going to flow through, but think of these things at these points? I'm so curious.
Yeah, both those things. So first of all, I don't really care about alignment, as long as the posture
Oh my gosh, no, just kidding.
Sorry,
people
Brett,
are
it
like
makes you cry.
gasping.
I'm sorry. I can see the Iyengar people out there writing angry emails.
I know.
I have a Russian student who's a long-term Iyengar teacher, and I'm always driving her nuts. So I did an Iyengar-based practice myself at lunchtime, actually. So yeah, no, I don't care that much about alignment, as long as it's pretty safe for the meantime. I don't think anyone's going to sort of hurt themselves being slightly off the perfect form with the straight lines that's drawn on the book, which those, many times those forms aren't particularly natural or organic for people anyway. So I'm not that interested in alignment unless it's kind of, something clearly dangerous. So I checked all the postures out as we're working with some sort of real experts in the anatomical field. And we made sure that they're pretty safe postures. Mostly they're kind of not too long or twisty or no big back bends or anything like that. So they're all fairly moderate postures in the first place. I demonstrate beforehand. We'll set it up. And then there's also a debrief afterwards. So this is the thing that's really novel, is people may have had 2 or 3 minutes in the posture, feeling if it's familiar, feeling if they need it or not, having an intuitive bodily response to it. So it's really bottom down rather than top down. So it's not imposing the posture and trying to get it perfect. It's really feeling into how the posture is and how you respond to that. And a bit that's quite different is that we then get people to do these very mindful communications for 1 minute where they partner up and they speak and listen about their experience. And we keep those pretty concise, both for people's clarity and also so it doesn't get too sort of heady and chatty. And that's in a sort of full EYP workshop. You do that in a kind of more blended class, like let's say Jamie or May and 2 teachers are trained, they'd be doing a kind of vinyasa-y kind of flow. And they might just be saying briefly, during the letting go part of the sun salutation, during the forward bend, they might be saying, okay, what do you need to let go of in your life? And during the warrior, they might say, how does that feel to be warrior-like? Or what do you need to reach up to during the sort of reaching up part of the sun salutation? So they might just be dropping in the odd question and then letting people pause and reflect internally without speaking afterwards. The speaking part, that's kind of crazy for some yoga people. They're like, I have to step off my mat and literally talk to another human being, like, social interaction. So, that's the part where it does deviate quite a bit from the average class.
I think you're asking what was going to be my next question, which was, is there a flow that happens, or is it like you literally debrief kind of after each pose or each section of poses? And it sounds like in the classes, it's more of a flow, but in the workshops, people actually do something like Warrior 2, and then instead of progressing into triangle or Ardha Chandrasana right away, they talk to a partner. Am I understanding it correctly?
Pretty much. I mean, because it's principles-based, different teachers do it differently depending on their audience and the settings. And, if I'm teaching 200 people at a yoga festival, it's different than if I've got 5 people in my front room. So, it depends on the audience and the crowd and how kind of weird we want to make it, like how different from regular yoga do we want to make it. You could be very light, it won't be light, or it can be so intense that most of the room are in tears within 20 minutes of coming in the workshop. We always often say the teachers, the biggest problem I have is that it works too well. It's really exposing of people's psychological patterns, really deep-seated stuff. And, this happens in yoga anyway, Brett. Like, I was noticing in yoga, I was noticing patterns with myself. Like, hey, I'm being a rebel today. I don't want to do what the teacher says. Or, hey, I want to be kind of told what to do today because I've been leading all day and I want to change. Or, hey, look, there's my Irish side coming out. Or, oh, there's my character. I like to be extroverted. Or I like the more yang poses. I'm a more yang kind of guy. And I struggle with the kind of letting go of child's pose, for example. And I noticed that. But then I'd have like not much space, unless it was a yin class or something. I wouldn't have much space to really be with that because the class was just moving too quick. So sometimes we do slow it down either in the class or just, maybe it's 20 minutes of hard vinyasa, but then we do shavasana for a couple of minutes, or we do kind of a rest pose with the knees up and just give people a chance to breathe and rest and reflect a minute. But we're always keeping it in the body so it doesn't become a kind of chatty or cognitive process.
So how does it work with the partner then? Because can you give an example maybe of what a dialogue would look like between 2 partners after a specific pose? Because this is so interesting. I'm having a really fun time visualizing it.
Yeah. And people can look at some of the YouTube videos if they want to see this in action. We've got it's kind of easier to show rather than tell in some ways. But it's kind of common sense. Like a lot of yoga teachers that I train were like, yeah, I kind of do this or I do a bit of it. It's like on the tip of their tongue, or they occasionally ask one of the questions I would ask. And a simple question for a 1 minute debrief, let's say we've just done Warrior 2 and we use non-standard postures that come from karate and tango and other systems, but we also use, regular yoga ones like Warrior 2. And it might be like, okay, where do you need to be this kind of warrior? Where do you need to be a warrior in your life? And people just name it and they speak authentically and they listen to each other deeply, because I always say, like, look, I'm not the best listener, but I can listen well for 30 seconds. If 30 seconds isn't enough time for people to start analyzing or giving each other advice or talking about their mothers, but it is enough time to tell the truth. It is enough time to say, you know what, I really need this in my marriage, or you know what, I'm taking way too much crap in the political scene right now. I need to stand up for what I believe. We do mountain as like, what do you stand for? We do corpse poses as death meditation. So even the things that look standard, we're doing at a deeper level. And then, of course, the other side that I think is so often missed, which is part of dance and some martial arts, and it's, part of partner yoga and acro yoga, combine it with those sometimes, is to say, what about human relationships, right? Because, for example, I love meditating, but meditating doesn't help me that much in human relationships. It might help my state, like I might be calmer when I talk to my wife, but it's not giving me much insight into how I am in relationship, because it's not a study of relationship, right? And relationships move pretty quick and normally with consequences in life. Like I don't want to screw up with a client. So to study it, we really slow it down, we break it down. We might have someone, for example, holding up your arms while you're in Warrior 2, if we stick with that example. And what we see is some people collapse on the person holding them. Some people won't let them take the weight. I'm a strong, independent young woman. I don't need anyone holding me. Some people kind of smile at the person. Some people ignore them. And all these patterns come out. My view is that human beings are, how can I say, partly holographic or partially consistent across domains and contexts, meaning that patterns come out real quick, even if it's just like being seen or being ignored. There's only about 8 possibilities for human relationship, and they're all pretty easy to model through this kind of simulators we're creating. And then the patterns are so obvious that like people laugh and cry and go, wow, this has, been so insightful.
This is really cool. So when I say something to my partner, like the 30 seconds afterwards, the partner responds or doesn't respond? The partner's job is just to listen. I just want to make sure I'm visualizing it right.
Yeah, we don't allow kind of coaching or therapy or stuff like that to happen. So we just say it's 1 minute, you speak, you're speaking and listening. And we don't tell people when to change. So, even that, we use everything in the class. Like, how do you take a partner? Do you grab one or do you let one grab you? At the end, do you kind of like thank them and hug them or cling to them? Or do you kind of just turn around as soon as the bell goes? So the whole process is interesting. Do you take up more of the space? Like there's cultural factors there, like if you have someone from Sweden and someone from Ireland or the USA, I'm Irish and I've spent time in the US, they'll take up more space on average. They'll speak for more than 30 seconds. And someone from another country, with more introverted country, won't. So it's the cultural factors come out as well, the personal factors, and just kind of how you are today, right? There's layers. You might be in a quiet mood that day. So all those factors can come out, even in something as simple as a 1 minute debrief.
I feel like a lot might come up for people really quickly. And like you say, there might be tears or emotions. If someone's noticing a pattern, like for example, it really resonated with me when you were talking about not letting your arms be held up in Warrior 2, because I do some body work stuff as well, and I can always tell, like I'll say, let me hold your leg or something if I'm adjusting someone on a massage table, and so often they won't give me their weight, right? They're bracing, subtly bracing. So you're like, no, I got you, give me your weight, and then you feel their weight drop. And you see
this in students, right? If you're teaching yoga, you see the students who are like leaning forward, the type A personalities who are in Warrior with all their weight forward and their back arm drooping, and then you see the sort of quiet, shy ones who won't extend their arms and won't bend their front knee, and like that patterns are real obvious to experienced yoga teachers. All we're doing is kind of pointing them out.
Right. And so if someone realizes something like this, like, wow, I really don't allow myself to receive support, for example, that's a big realization, and it seems like it might be hard to then like keep doing more poses and keep discovering more things. It's almost like I feel like I'd be like, oh my gosh, I want to like journal on this or get to the bottom of it or figure it out. Like, how do people not go into total overwhelm once they sort of step into this?
Yeah. So first of all, different people pop with different things, depending on their self-awareness. Most of my students have pretty good self-awareness already. And we also do some gatekeeping around the workshop. So we're saying, look, if you have current active mental health issues or you've suffered a recent bereavement, maybe don't come. We say this is disruptive, not relaxing. It's why it will never be really popular, because it doesn't bliss you out. And, so some gatekeeping up front. And the other thing is like, we let people take rest whenever they want. Like we have a lounge area in many of our workshops, which has mats and beanbags and bolsters, and you could just go sleep for half an hour if you want. Like that's really okay. Like you can just opt out. If someone comes and has one huge insight that will change their life, that's great. And sometimes they'll do one and nothing will happen, and do a second one, they'll be like, oh yeah, I kind of already knew that, and then do the third one, they'll be like, oh my God, like whoa, I never saw that before. And then they might need to go for a walk, or they might need to lie down. And we do a lot of intricative stuff, like little walking around the room, little dancing, regular shavasanas and child's pose, massage at the end of the day. So we have a whole, I do kind of in-depth psychological work with businesses, and I've done it in war zones, all kinds of groups and all kinds of areas. So I'm used to kind of doing stuff to help people integrate. And, the trauma awareness is also part of the training. So, there's ways that make this safe, but it's juicy, it's full on. For me, it's far more interesting than just stretching my hamstrings.
Oh, for sure. Now, if someone notices a pattern, like the example we just gave, maybe someone notices, I don't allow myself to feel supported, right? Let's just go with that one for right now. Is there a way that this technique works to actually help them then break the pattern? Like, is it just about awareness, or then it's like, okay, I've had this realization, I'm not allowing myself to, yeah, like how does the yoga then come in? Like, I've noticed a pattern in my life. I don't allow people to support my arms in Warrior Two, and it means like I don't let in help when I should. How do I now fix this, and can I fix it through yoga or time on the mat?
Great question. So let's start first of all with someone that maybe just needs to be more warrior-like, and then we'll move to that partner example you gave, if I may. So I think it will be clearer in an individual example. So let's say someone says, you know what, I just noticed that warrior is difficult for me, and I've realized that's a pattern for me as a person. So then we'll give them that as a practice, and with a different intention and a different awareness now. The physical practice of warrior every single morning, you know, even if it's just for a minute or two, really get it and embodying that and being present in that, not just doing the physical shape as exercise. And then we'll give them ways to get that into their life. So warrior walking will say, right, you know, extend your stride, you know, that big long warrior posture. There's a walking equivalent, pushing from the back foot, looking straight ahead rather than put your head on straight, rather than have it on the, you know, have your head tilted to the side. Stop smiling at everyone all the time. You know, like there's ways, you know, focus your drishti. There's ways we can create that warriorness into things they can do every day in their life. Okay. Now so that's the sort of basic method there. Both, they might also shift what kind of yoga they were doing. You know, like I often observe that yin people tend to have a yin practice and yang people have a yang practice, which is just deepening their neurosis, basically. So sometimes it's helpful to go, you know what, you can still do your yin yoga, that's great, but maybe take up Ashtanga a couple of times a week as well. Add that to your practice as a sort of, we call that a macro practice. So they might make some shifts into their sort of yoga practice that they're doing. I mean, most people come to me already yogis. So again, you know, back to your earlier question, they're fairly familiar with the poses and they're fairly kind of well versed in it. It's not a beginner's practice in many ways. Now, your one about how is it to have your arms held? Again, we could give you that as a practice. You know, we could actually have you do that regularly with a partner. You say you live with someone, a friend or a romantic partner, we might give you a practice of just having them hold your head every night. You know, that's a really beautiful couples practice, for example. And it's not some big weird tantra thing. It's just a pleasant little thing they can do with their partner at the end of the day to let their partner hold them, to hold their weight. And then they can maybe, you know, put it in their diary, like, you know, reminders throughout the day. Am I letting other people hold my weight today? Is there a way I can do that in my work today? Is there something I can let someone else in my office take over doing, for example? We'll give them a few concrete examples. Does my partner actually want to clean the house and take that weight off me today? So there's little things they can actually do, little behavioral change things they can do. The main one is just people just practice. Like, it's kind of boring, but the answer to anything, I generally, whenever my students ask me a question, I say practice.
It sounds like the poses that you have an aversion to are the ones that hold the gold nugget a little bit in this practice. Is that true?
Well, I'd say either a longing or a triggering. So I don't want to get into this kind of Calvinist thing that, you know, that kind of everything hard must be good for you. You know, that's really implicit in kind of Judeo-Christian mindset that it has thoroughly infected yoga. Sometimes it's actually what you're really longing for, but there is a reaction. There isn't just a sort of neutrality. So people learning to differentiate like the smell of their own crap, you know, what's familiar with what is like longed for and exciting. Like, wow, yeah, I need that. You know, the first time I walked into my Aikido dojo, I was kind of wretchedly alcoholic and suicidal. And I looked at Aikido and just something in my system went, you need this. And then it was real tough, but I did it, and it, you know, really saved my life. And sometimes it's like that on a mini level with a posture. Your body goes, yeah, you're longing for it. But often it's just like, I remember the first time there's a pose from Iyengar, which we have adapted into something called vulnerability pose. And it's kind of sweet. It's kind of innocent looking. The feet are to the side and the hands are on one knee. And it's almost a little bit camp, dare I say it. The first time I did that posture, I was like, hell no, I don't want to do this. And it was clear. It wasn't just like a problem that my femur didn't really rotate very well. It was an emotional reaction. And my teacher was like, what's the problem? I'll just do it for 30 seconds. It's not a big deal. And afterwards I went, okay, that's interesting. And then I kind of felt into the posture and I realized it was about innocence and sweetness and things that I kind of disowned. And then I practiced it. And now I did that posture this lunchtime, and after like 2 years I really like that posture, and it's made a different side of my character. Like, you still have your strengths. It's good to play with from your strengths as well as your weaknesses, but we all need some range, right, rather than becoming a caricature.
Yeah, that's a nice example. I know for me, Kundalini yoga has made it very apparent to me, like where I'm triggered, for example. And it really does. It brings in such a greater awareness. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what you said, meditating not being that helpful for human relationships. I thought that was really, really interesting because it is such a solitary practice. Can you say a little bit more about that? Or do you have a meditation practice, or what do you encourage your students?
I mean, no, I meditate every day, and I've done, extended monastic stays and solitary retreats, and I'm proper signed up to everyone Buddhist. So, I don't want people to hear I'm down on meditation. I think self-awareness is the foundation of self-regulation and self-expression. So it's the absolute foundation of the sort of skills of what we could call embodied intelligence. However, that's just like one side of the picture. It's like self-awareness and then the sort of self-regulation expression. What about social awareness? Like, are you aware if your partner is stressed? Are you aware if your partner is in a good mood? Are you aware if your partner is turned on? Whatever. That's just partner example. Are you aware about your boss? Whatever you want to be aware of. So are we aware of other people? How is meditation going to help us with that? I mean, it will help a bit because it will make us more sensitive. It will make us calmer, but it's not specifically a practice at looking at others, right? And I mean, there are interpersonal meditations, things like circling that try that, and they can be very beautiful, but generally, it's a solitary practice, a kind of interoception. And it's certainly not a practice of like influencing people. Like, will meditating help you make people laugh or help you be a better leader? I mean, it will, again, make you calmer and more self-aware, which is a good base. It's nice to have that state, but it's not specifically practicing interpersonal skills. And I think that is a massive flaw. And it's not that meditation's bad, as I said, again, in case people think I'm kicking their puppy. It's a really great foundation, and you need an interpersonal practice. And that could be Aikido or Tango or paired Tai Chi or one of these kind of forms of interpersonal meditation like circling. But you need some kind of interpersonal practice if you're going to develop interpersonal skills. I mean, it's pretty, you said it before all my blabber, you said it, Brett, I think just in like one sentence.
No, I love it. And everyone, we're going to pick right up with this topic on Thursday because I think this is really important. This idea that yes, meditation is wonderful, but it's not going to necessarily take us all the way in terms of enhancing our life off the mat. I think we want to pick up with that immediately on Thursday. So make sure to tune into Thursday's episode. As always, thank you for listening all the way to the very end. Remember to support the show. Leave a rating or review here on iTunes, savannahspirit.com/review. We'll show you exactly how to do that. Make sure to get out and do yoga today, and maybe bring a little bit of extra awareness into some of your postures like Warrior 2 or Tadasana, like we talked about with Mark today. I'll talk to you on Thursday, and I'm sending lots of love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode. And thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.